Hello guys, welcome to Redditor's Revenge. Here we post amazing revenge stories daily, and if you want more content like this, please subscribe to the channel and stay tuned with us. Moving on to today's first story. Don't ever get into a relationship with someone who does not share your views no matter how much you think you love them, because it would always end up in heartbreak just as mine did. I come from a monogamous Christian home. It was just my father, my mother, my brother, and I. My family was such a serene one that I looked forward to when I would have my own, me, my husband, and my kids. I never knew that the fact that my family was good and enviable never meant it was the same everywhere. I got into college and I had everything provided for me, and I was making my parents proud until I met and fell in love with Ahmed, a Muslim from a polygamous home. My relationship with Ahmed was something we had to hide from my parents because it went against all my parents had taught me while growing up. How would they react when they found out that I was dating a guy who was not a Christian? Worse still, a Muslim, but Ahmed was different from the normal religious fanatics around. He did not let his religious background come between us. Whenever we were together, we never brought up issues about our beliefs, we just enjoyed our company. I supported Ahmed from the allowance my parents gave to me, as his parents never really gave him enough, because his father had other children from other wives to equally take care of too. We graduated from college, and though I was yet to get a job, Ahmed got one that paid him well. But trouble started when Christian suitors began coming to our house to seek my hand in marriage. I turned them down, and my parents could not just understand why their daughter, who was old enough to get married, was reluctant in doing so. I knew that sooner or later I would need to come clean and tell them that I had been dating a Muslim right from my college days, and I did. I brought Ahmed to introduce him to my parents, and even though they were welcoming and never reacted in his presence, I knew that they would come really hard on me once Ahmed left. My parents expressed their disappointment that I would abandon the Christian suitors that came for me because of someone of a different faith. I never really cared about what they were saying. I explained to my parents that we both loved ourselves, and we were determined not to let our religious differences get in the way of our love, but my parents still maintained the fact that getting married to a Muslim would end up badly for me. They told me that a Muslim was permitted by their religion to get married to multiple wives, and getting married to him meant that I could end up sharing my husband with multiple women. I wish I saw the truth in what they said, but I did not. Ahmed was so much in love with me, and so the thought of him pushing me aside was not something that bothered me. I never sat down to think about issues that could spring up, like how we would raise our children. Would they be Christians or would they be brought up in the Muslim faith? I was just stupid. I remained adamant that Ahmed was the one that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, so they had no option but to let me have my way. I was a grown woman after all. Ahmed and I took the next step, which was meeting his parents. I felt that his parents were not going to consent to our union, but contrary to my expectations, they gave the go-ahead. It seemed really weird that Ahmed's parents gave their consent without questions and objections, and though my parents were concerned about it because a traditional Muslim would seriously object to letting their child get married to a non-Muslim, I dismissed the suggestion that there could be a hidden agenda, and that was where I was wrong. I never knew that the only reason Ahmed's parents were willing to let their son get married to me was that they had given him a 1-year deadline to get me converted. Otherwise he was to put me off or risk being labeled a rebel. Ahmed and I got married, and for the first few months, we lived peacefully. He was loving and caring to a fault, but he soon began changing drastically. He started taking more interest in his religion, and I initially had no issues with that, but he got worse and I could not just keep quiet. He started demanding that I spend less time in my religion and join him to carry out some of his religious duties. I was shocked because his attitude was something I had never seen or thought he possessed. I tried being reasonable with him when his demands were getting too much, but he simply said that all he was doing was for my own good. I could not understand how forcing me to abandon my religion for his was for my own good. We began growing distant. The picture of the kind of family I thought I was going to have when I got married was not what I was seeing. It dawned on me that my parents were right all along when Ahmed finally demanded that I converted to his religion, otherwise he was going to get married to another wife. His threat broke my heart. I never saw it coming. Here was a guy that turned out all right because I made a few sacrifices for him. How ungrateful people can become. I thought long and hard about what options I had. I could not become a Muslim, and at the same time, I was not willing to leave a marriage that was just a few months old, because the shame would be too much. I remained unyielding to his demand, and he let the matter lie. I thought his threat was probably a bluff that was meant to make me convert, but I soon received a painful surprise a few weeks later as he started making preparations for the wedding ceremony and all. It was clear that he meant business, and I tried talking him out of it, but he stood his ground by saying that I was the one forcing him to get married with my unwillingness to convert to Islam. I had no one to turn to for counsel. I could not go to my parents who had warned me earlier about the likely outcome that I was now seeing, though I knew that my parents would receive me with open arms. I did the only thing I could do, and that was to just pray and hope that Ahmed had a rethink and straightened out. My prayers were of no effect as my husband married not just one wife but two. Two Muslim women who could not really match up to me in any way. I was finer and more educated, they were both illiterates by my estimation. I remember the day my co-wives moved into the house like it happened yesterday. The ladies were just all over the place trying to please their husbands while settling into the house that Ahmad's sweat and my little sacrifices in school had produced. It hurt, but there was virtually nothing I could do. Yet, the house gradually became unbearable for me. We were now 3 women sharing a husband, and so everyone was bound to be dissatisfied except the man. I happily watched from the side as the house soon turned into a war zone as both wives clashed daily over one little issue or the other. Ahmad's plan was beginning to backfire, but that was just the beginning. The worst was yet to come. He would soon reap the bitter fruits of polygamy. Both ladies soon began going outside to cheat on him, and given the circumstances, it was not surprising to me. I learned about their escapades, but I mentioned nothing about it to Ahmad. We were not even talking much. I knew I had to take other precautionary measures for my safety, and so I just quit having sexual relations with Ahmad. He was not disturbed though. After all, he had 2 women at his beck and call. It was really difficult staying without intimacy. I could not get a lover as that was not how I was raised, and so I had to fight the hunger for sex when it came. I was stuck, but it was better than picking up an STI that one of my co-wives could easily get from one of their numerous lovers, and then pass it on to our husband who might just end up passing it on to me. I had been in my husband's home for 9 months now, and unknown to me, he had just 1 month to get me converted, something which was not likely to happen. His parents and siblings began paying him frequent visits, and they would have long hours of uninterrupted discussions. I never knew what it was they were talking about, but I observed that they were becoming hostile toward me while bonding with the latest wives in the house. They rejected all forms of hospitality from me while they appreciated all that my co-wives did, and I felt like an outcast. Various thoughts began running through my mind, but 2 stood out. Were they displeased with me because I had not given their son a child yet, or had my husband reported to me to his people that I was disobedient to him at home? If only they knew that getting pregnant for their son was not in my plans, as I was avoiding any form of sexually transmitted infection, and converting to their religion was off the table. It was not disobedience. On the contrary, I was only sticking to the agreement I and Ahmed had before our wedding, when we both agreed to not let religion come in the way of our marriage. If anyone was disrespectful to our union, it was my husband. Ahmed called me a week later to inform me that I was to leave his house. I had begun suspecting that it would get to this point, and who would not? When a wife no longer has sexual relations and is not on talking terms with her husband who sees her as being stubborn, it is only normal that separation is expected, but one can never be really prepared for the moment. I was not. I tried holding back tears from my eyes because of the shame which I was going to pass through, and Ahmad was busy talking nonsense about how he still loved me, but his family demanded that I be converted or leave his home. How shameless. He then told me that he had entered into an agreement with his parents that I would be converted to their religion, and that was why they had sanctioned our union. It was then that the whole picture became clear, but I was not going to excuse my husband. If at all he loved me, then he ought to have fought hard to keep his family from interfering in our marriage. At least, that was what my religion would encourage at that point in time. I kept quiet. There was no use talking or trying to fight for our marriage, which had a faulty foundation. It was already a lost cause when he brought 2 additional ladies into our bed. I was not going to wait around for the deadline to come, so I just began packing my things. I could see the look of happiness written all over the faces of my co-wives who were glad that I was leaving. Ahmed gave me some money on my way out, but I threw it back at him. His money was not going to wipe off the shame that he had brought on me. I left his house in confusion. I did not have a job or a life. I finally decided to return to my parents and face whatever would happen. I got to my parents' home, and they were shocked to see me as they were not expecting me. More so, I was with my belongings. I could tell that they had questions in their mind, but I broke down in tears before they could ask any. My family was very forgiving. My parents did not waste time putting any blame on me for neglecting their opinion to not get married to a Muslim. They rather began helping me heal. My father told me that I should have left my Muslim home the moment I began experiencing ill treatment. They were however glad that I had not gotten pregnant for my husband because there was really nothing connecting the both of us anymore, so I could get on with my life. 3 months after moving back in with my parents, I met Patrick, a divorcee who had a daughter. He was a Christian, and his wife had died during childbirth. He made his intention about marriage toward me clear, but I was really hesitant because I was going through a healing phase and did not think getting hitched to another guy was a nice idea. My skepticism about the whole thing was clear to him as he knew about my past, which virtually every other person equally knew about, so he went through my parents, who in turn decided to talk to me. My father noted that getting married to the right person could be part of the healing process, and Patrick, who shared the same faith with me, was likely going to turn out better than my first husband. He encouraged me that court Patrick for a while, and if I don't feel right about the whole thing, then I could call it quits. My parents had been right before, and what I was suffering was a result of ignoring their counsel when it came before, so I heeded their suggestion this time around. I gave Patrick a chance and we began courting for a period of about 6 months in which I carefully looked out to see if he was anything like Ahmed. I was not willing to walk the same road of torture twice. Patrick was real. He did not love everything I loved simply because he was trying to please me, just as my first husband had done back then in school, while we were still dating. I bonded very well with his daughter and I genuinely had affection for her. Patrick proposed the 6 months of our courting, and I said yes. We were wed in the church, and this time around, I did not need to bother if there was any hidden agenda to either get me converted to another religion or something else. It was when I got married to Patrick that I discovered that the family which I had always expected to have could be a reality. Patrick was a husband and father in the real sense of the word, while I was a wife and mother to him and his daughter, to the point that someone who was ignorant of our past would most definitely think that I was the biological mother to his daughter. There is indeed a great difference when you get married to someone who shares the same ideology as you. Unlike Ahmed, Patrick was not in support of me just being a sit-at-home wife. He assisted in getting me a good job, and 2 months into our marriage I was pregnant with our first son. Things were going well for me, but I could not say the same for my first husband Ahmed. We were living in the same city, so it was not difficult to get updates about the things that were going on around him. Both wives were no longer living with him. One had been disgraced and sent away after it was discovered that she was pregnant for her lover, while the other had run away when she contracted a sexually transmitted disease that she passed on to her husband. Ahmed was now living with his parents and siblings who were taking care of him. It served them right. Ahmed had a woman who was everything that a reasonable man would crave, but because of his religious stupidity, he let his family ruin his life. It's been 3 years now and I still don't pity him. Because even though I am no longer as bitter as I was when he threw me out, the memory would always remain a painful one. Now, here is the end of our first story, and I hope you guys are enjoying my content. So before moving to the next story, you guys can share your thought in the comments section about this story, and let me know if you want more such stories or not. Also hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay tuned with us for more satisfying revenge stories. Now, moving on to our final story. My next-door neighbors have rubbed me the wrong way ever since I moved here 3 years ago. The husband, let's call him Mike, struck me as a little sleazy, and the wife, we'll call her Sharon, seemed nosy and judgmental as hell. But I know myself, I know I'm quick to judge and get stuck in a certain opinion of people. My daughter is about the same age as theirs, and let's call her Maria, and she has a bit of trouble making friends. So when Sharon suggested they have weekly play dates, alternating between their house and mine, I put my dislike of her aside and agreed. It all seemed to be going fine for a while, but my daughter eventually seemed less enthusiastic about going over to their place. I talked to her about it, and she admitted she didn't like Sharon. Apparently, Sharon had been watching them play and directing them on how to play, and she often interrupted to ask my daughter intrusive questions about our family, especially about my kids' paternity. My daughter is a picky eater, so to start with I would send her over with snacks I know she can eat in case there was nothing there she could eat. My daughter had told me she didn't need those snacks because they had food there she could eat. But it turns out Sharon had told her she was being rude for bringing her own food to someone else's house, and if she wanted to eat she had to eat what Sharon gave her, so, of course, she just didn't eat there. On top of that, Sharon would invite my daughter to Sunday school every time, and had gotten very pushy even though she consistently said no. My daughter still wanted to play with Maria, so we decided the playdates could continue, but only if they were at our place. I made my excuses to Sharon, and initially, she agreed to only have play dates at my house. But when Sharon and Maria showed up, they both came inside instead of Sharon leaving Maria at the door as usual. In front of her daughter, and my son, Sharon said they'd been praying about it as a family, and God had guided them and told them not to leave their daughter with an unmarried mother because apparently, it shows I can't make good choices and they're worried I would influence her to make poor decisions with her life and stray from her faith. And then they left. So, I was right about Sharon being nosy and judgmental. I decided to find out if I was right about Mike. I made accounts on Instagram and Facebook posing as an attractive young lady with lots of somewhat local friends. I followed him on Instagram, and he followed back. He immediately messaged me, and the messages quickly went from vaguely flirty to obviously try to get some. I then took screenshots of the messages and sent them to Sharon in a Facebook message. I didn't get a response, but I did see Mike storming out of the house with a small suitcase and driving off rather recklessly. He did come back a couple of days later, so I haven't destroyed their marriage or anything, but I definitely put a dent in it. Now, here is the end of our today's video, and I hope you enjoyed these revenge stories. Guys, I want to hear your thought about this petty revenge story in the comments section, and let me know if you were in OP's situation, what would you do? And, before you leave, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to remain updated on more fantastic stories.